I have a small, okay, thank you. First, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I too really want to commend the University of Katowice for organizing such an interesting event. And it's really illustrative of a discussion that we had to do yesterday, whether Katowice is an entrepreneurial university. Definitely, it has a spirit of enterprise. And by seeing all these young people around, I'm comforting in that feeling. You will have a number of presentations today. Some of them are, more about your education development path. Others about self-development. Mine is a little bit in between, I would say, because I want to kind of open up or widen your horizons by focusing on perhaps what is happening in other places in the world. And these developments, they will shape the global future. This is a very ambitious question. I don't have an answer. I don't know who has the answers, but we have bits of pieces of elements which can help us perhaps better understand what's going on. And that's my objective, is just to introduce you to perhaps issues that you would not know, so that as time goes, you dig into them or you better understand what's going on, because these events will shape your future. Actually, when I was your age, if you had asked me where will you be in 20 years from now, I would say, oh, I don't know. 10 years from now, well, I'm not sure I know. But I have a little bit of an idea. And I'll come back to that later. But one of my ideals, and we were in the 60s and 70s, was to save the world. Because there were famine in the world, especially in Africa. And the UN was doing a lot of work to help these poor children or poor families, especially on the African continent. And I felt I could contribute. I would save the world. So I ended up working for the United Nations. That was my dream. But you can do that in various ways. What's important is you have a solid background and that you have a passion. If you have a passion, at the end of the day, you will reach perhaps necessarily 100% of your dream, but you'll get on the way to it. So back to more basically concrete or elements. Who will shape the global future? I have a question, which is, in your opinion, I have 4 pictures, and we'll ask you which of the following 4 pictures is more relevant to define the emerging future. The first picture is about COP27. COP27 is an international conference which is about the Paris Agreement on climate change, to combat climate change. The meeting is ending today. There are lots of negotiation. They may drag a little bit. We know we are far from where we would like to be under the 1.5 or even the 2.3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. But there are efforts. So first picture, COP27, heads of governments. By the way, an interesting picture about that. We can come back later on. You may have a remark. Second one is the G20. This is an old picture. The idea was basically to these ideas that you have around the table, not only the most powerful economic nations, but a group of Tech 20 nations. We include nations that were considered developing in the past. So that's the number 2. The number 3, perhaps you will recognize yourself better in that one, is young people demonstrating for more action. I guess they are addressing that to governments, but also to people of my generation. What have you done? That's a big question. So that's the question's third one. And the fourth picture is in Africa, a classroom where you have a mixture of kind of old elements. You have wooden desks and some future or at least modern ways of teaching with computers. So you have these 4 pictures, and my question will be if you could raise your arm for question number 1, sorry, image number one. Who thinks that, you know, the COP27 basically is the more relevant to define our future? So I have one. Be bold. You have been told here, be bold. You know, there is no good or right answer. There is no wrong answer. You just justify or just say, that's my feeling. So I have only one for COP27. Are you so pessimistic about what governments can, you know, achieve? It's not what they can achieve. Also, it's the journey, the efforts to it. The number two, the second question, second picture. This group representing a larger set or categories of countries with developed countries and other countries that are emerging or developing. Who thinks these are those who definitely will be more relevant to define our future? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so about 5 or 6 here. I counted about 6 or 7 here, so about 12, let's say. And here, nobody. Okay, let's say altogether 15. So the COP27 is really definitely beaten. The next picture is this demonstration of the young in a city, in a Western country. You are destroying our future. You have to do something about it. Who will think this is most relevant? 6 here. I would say about 8 here and 2 here. Okay, so it thinks the number 3 appears to be winning right now. And the last one, classroom in Africa with a mixture of all. 1, 2, so 5, about 4 here, 9, and none here. Okay, interestingly, perhaps not so surprisingly, is the number 3, where it's a fourth of the young population who is the most relevant to define our future. Frankly speaking, this is very encouraging, because it means that you believe in what you are doing, and that you will. It's very, very encouraging. I have selected the number 2 because I'm an economist, and of course, I want to give you also a global picture of what's going on. Because, as I said, when I was your age, we were talking about the poor, the developing country. We were even labeling those countries the third world. That was giving you really the one below. And we were the north, the developed countries. And then the world has completely changed. And nowadays, our economy, as our jobs in the Western world, has been facing strong competition for this so-called third world. So the world is changing. It's not only our economy, it's even our way of life. You all are on, or most of you, I suppose, are on TikTok. This is a big Chinese company. Just 5 or 10 years ago, in the entertainment industry, who would have thought that TikTok would be, number 1 above any other, Facebook? I'm told Facebook is the thing of the seniors. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not on Facebook, so I'm not a senior. But anyway, what I mean is that the world has changed, not only economics, but it is our own way of life. So it impacts not only our job, but also our values, and that's very important. So I'm going to concentrate on this one, and I wanted to show you why these economies are so important. This is a graph, and I hope it's okay. I understand you have not yet begun your university work, so I try to explain it. If you have questions at the end, because I'm a little bit obscure, do not hesitate. Sometimes, we use a jargon or we take things for granted, and they are not. I have kids your age. Yes, I have to explain things which for me seem so natural. So do not hesitate if you have a question. What's very important is that these 21 countries, it's emerging countries plus China. Nowadays, it's about half of the world's production of what we call the global domestic product. So it's about half of the world economy. But if you look at 1991, this is a blue line. If you look at 1995 or even 2000, at the beginning of this century, the share of these economies in the world economy, the global output, was not even a third. So in a matter of about 20 years, this economy have exceeded the so-called Western economic power. So that's very, very telling, and it explains also why we have substantial issues in the Western world, and even issues related to democracies, whether there is a lot of frustration, in particular in Eastern Europe, perhaps in Poland, but definitely in other economies in the European Union, because there has been a shift. The balance, to some extent, has changed. This country is a third of global trade and so on. But what is very important also is China is the second largest economy in the world. 20 years ago, it was not even in the list of the top 20. So again, it's major change. And by the way, India, who used to be considered really also at the bottom, is now the 5th or 6th largest economy. It has even surpassed or exceeded the United Kingdom 2 years ago. So think about that, India getting over the UK nowadays in terms of economic weight. And it's also very important. The demographic factor is essential in my view. Those 21 countries is 55% of the world population. So that means not only a consumer market, but also a population that has needs. And there is no surprise that we have issues related to immigration, because you have 55% of the population in only these 21 countries, and add to them a number of other even poorer ones. These countries are also, so I want to give you a little bit of a picture, a global picture, so that you will better understand what's going on, and perhaps that will help you to select an avenue of work or research profession in the years ahead, because I understand you are at the crossroads. These emerging economies that were not featuring in the landscape 20 or 25 years ago, they have now reached a very high level of soft and geopolitical power. And you may have heard of a summit which takes place almost every year, which is called the BRICS Summit. It's a summit which gathers Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. An interesting mixture, because all of these countries do not necessarily get along on the issue, but for this particular purpose, they meet. What does that mean? It means that there is a group of countries which get together and who has an approach to the world economy and the world politics, which is not the one of the traditional powers. So again, additional questions. These also economies which have created 2 development banks. And I'm going to tell you why it's important. Working in the United Nations and in the development field, I have seen over the decades the influence and the weight, of course, of development banks, that is, institutions who give money to poor countries. These 2 institutions, the International Monetary Fund, known as the IMF, of the World Bank, were places where the deciding power of who will get the money and how many, broadly speaking, I'm schematizing, that power was in the end of the industrial economy. Nowadays, we have these 2 banks, and especially the second one, the Asian Investment Infrastructure Banks, where the deciding powers in the hands of emerging markets and particular economies from Asia, especially China, India, and a few others. So that means that, in a way, in terms of views, in terms of directions, you do not necessarily follow the recommendations that were put forward before by institutions which were led by Western traditional countries. So what does it mean? It means in terms of power in the world, you now have an alternative. In caricature, you do not necessarily need to go along 100% with the United States or with the EU. You can go along with, more where China thinks or other Asian countries. This is very, very important for poor countries or other emerging economy because they need money to build electricity infrastructure, to build ports. So these are alternatives, and it explains also that you have a kind of, I would not say division, but somehow a different, a global landscape. You do not have only one monolithic approach, which was led by Western countries, of which you are part as Poland in the EU, but you have also another group of countries which may have different ideological approaches or political approaches. And in terms of geopolitics, and we are in a time of where geopolitics is crucial, that matters a lot. The other point I wanted to mention, I mentioned TikTok a moment ago because it's making headlines nowadays. I want also to say that and again, always in that perspective of where is the power, basically economic and geopolitical power, you have also the fact that where is the technology, where are the innovation leaders? It used to be, as said, that almost 2 centuries since the Industrial Revolution, the technological and other breakthrough in terms of innovation, they were most of them in the industrialized nation. And this has changed over the past 20 years. You have lots of innovation taking place in China, I'll come back to that, but also in Brazil, in Argentina, in South Africa, in different levels, in niches. That means that the technology and innovation supremacy is not what it used to be. And again, it has an impact on the world, it has an impact on the way you can understand the world, and it may have an impact also in your work, because you may work eventually for a multinational from India, China, and Indonesia. You would also possibly have to adapt to the business environment of those countries. So that's what I want to say. We are global. And that's why I think this conference, Science or Economics Without Borders, is so important, because in the titles it says a lot. By the way, on the right side, it's the bottom part of a quantum computer. It's a place where the cooling is taking place. Don't ask me too much more about it in terms of technology. That's what I know about it. Why I've put that? Because Asia, in particular China, is extremely advanced on quantum computing. And this is going to be revolutionizing lots of things in industry and also in society. It has to be watched upon. You don't read a lot about it. You don't see many publications, but things are really taking place in this area. And that takes me to the science. Katowice, place of science, hard science are essential. It's good to have very good knowledge in business and so on, but don't forget hard science, because at the end of the day, they will be making the difference. Okay. These are examples of companies I wanted to share with you. You all know Alibaba, okay? But all know Amazon. But in other places of the world, like in Latin America, you have Mercado Libre, which is a huge e-commerce firm. And these are examples of industries where companies from these so-called emerging markets are coming, and they're extremely powerful. So I mentioned Alibaba, Mercado Libre, and Jumia because they are very innovative. Alibaba, everybody knows, but Jumia and Mercado Libre are very innovative because that's also a key in emerging market, but you can also apply it, is turning challenges into opportunities. This is essential. If you take the example of Jumia, it's an e-commerce firm in Africa. The infrastructure, in many cases, is poor. For instance, the banking system. Less than 30, perhaps 25% of the population in Africa has a bank account. So how do you pay if you want to buy something on a web platform if you don't have a credit card? This company has created its internal payment system. Same thing with Mercado Libre. And it's something which does not exist or did not exist in Amazon because in developed world, we have a credit card, for instance. Same thing for the delivery system. So this company, they have managed to really reach the top in their region by converting challenging into opportunities, and that's what makes the difference. And the other one is the State Grid, the company that Mark knows I like to quote quite a lot. It's the largest electricity company in the world. I mentioned hard science. This is a company which basically is a leader in ultra-high voltage electricity. Why does it matter? Because their technology enables them to transport electricity on very long distance, thousands of kilometers, without losses. And this is essential because in terms of managing the grid and then, of course, developing the infrastructure, that makes a big difference. So they base their development on hard science, and they have invested a lot abroad. By the way, it's a Chinese state-owned enterprise, which partly explains their ability to invest also in research and development. Okay, so who will guide the emerging future? I selected the second one, and I'm happy because I would say that more or less it might have been the number 2 in the competition. But I also liked, as I said, very, very much that you selected the number 3 because it means that you believe in your future. And that's very, very important. Just an anecdote, I am a little bit struck, especially in my country, I come from France, where I listen to the news and everything is black and dark and so on, and say, how can you project yourself in such a world? So it's important to give the message that you have the energy of the youth, and in a way, the future is young. It's very, very important. Be bold, be creative. Already, as Hubert has mentioned, there is a lot that can be made. So you have to know your environment. I think you need to have a solid background to understand what's going on. It's very nice to have soft-skilled, but I'll take a step back. Have a solid background, understand what's going on. Get a little bit of information on history. Very important to understand history, especially in Eastern Europe. That will also help you to understand what's going on. So the number 4 could also be now selected because Africa is, also is the continent of the future, the one which will have the highest demographic growth. By 2030, we will have 2.5 billion people in Africa. Half of them will be less than 25 years old. So a very, very young continent. These people need jobs, they need security. We have also to deal with this challenge. Number 1, unfortunately, I can understand you didn't select it. I'm a little more optimistic, perhaps because of my UN background. You will not solve the climate change issue if nobody's on board, bottom line. So we have to find a way. I know it looks like a diplomatic answer, but if this is what is driving the negotiators and the government, that's what matters. And there are efforts being made, and want to be optimistic there. I don't also why we are all doomed, and I don't think that's the case. Actually, I hope you as a young generation, you will help us have a nice days ahead. Okay. Now, I want to finish with a particular personage or individual, I don't know how to say that, which is Maria Sklodowska, which I'm sure all of you know. This is a little bit more personal, but when I was a young girl in Paris, actually that's where I was born, I was fascinated by Maria. We knew her as Marie Curie, actually. Not so much because she had 2 Nobel Prizes in chemistry and physics, it's extremely rare. Perhaps it's exceptional. It is exceptional. I don't know if she's the only one who was in situation. So, of course, it was already something. But by the fact that, you know, she was from a country, from Eastern Europe, which was a little far away for us, for some of the reasons that you mentioned a moment ago. It was a strange country, but also because she came to Paris when she was 24 years old to continue her scientific studies. She married Pierre Curie, and she broke basically the barriers: language, culture, gender, and of course the scientific barriers. So I don't know what she was thinking when she was a little, what she was in her heart when she was a little girl, but I'm sure that she knew she had a future. It's a very, it's a personage, it's an individual which is, I think, really very, very motivating, in particular for the girls and the women in the audience, because she was in hard science. So I encourage you to go into these careers. In any case, I encourage you to be bold and creative, as was mentioned a moment ago, because at the end of the day, the future is yours. And I will stop here.
Professor Anne Miroux, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Maybe you have some questions to Professor Anne Miroux. You're really not on Facebook? Did I hear it right? Did I get it right? You are not on Facebook? Is that correct?
No, I'm not on Facebook.
How come?
You know,
how is that possible?
I don't like to follow the crowds. Years ago, I tried once. The principle bothers me.
Okay.
I'll stop there. So no, I'm not on Facebook.
Okay.
Definitely. But I am in other social networks. We could have a very long conversation on social networks. Social network works if you have an educated background. Otherwise, you are prone to all sorts of news. And we see what's happening. Could be a very long conversation.
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm
of
not.
course. It's a very interesting issue. How about LinkedIn? Maybe you believe in LinkedIn. Are
yeah,
you
of
there?
course. No,
of
no.
course.
I'm not a dinosaur. Don't give the impression I'm a dinosaur. But what I mean is
didn't think that.
You have to be selective.
Okay.
And to select those who can be helpful to you and not too much intruding. And that's it. So yeah, I'm on LinkedIn,
okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
So you can find me on LinkedIn if you want.
That's good news. Okay. We have a question over there. Oh, I can see a few hands. I think we have time for 2 questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. It gives me a few good thoughts about it. And I would like to ask, how long do you think does it take China to overcome America as the biggest economy in the world?
Okay, so you will read sometime in the press that China is already the #1 economy. It's just a matter of indicators that you use. I don't want to go into too many details, but in what we call the nominal GDP, that is the amount of dollars nowadays of the Chinese economy, it's #2. But if you take another calculation which take into account inflation and so on and type of living, China is already the #1. And in terms of nominal GDP, it is said that China may overcome the US in a couple of years. We will see, given the situation right now, but it will be, yes, a couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And
don't forget there is 1.5 billion customers in China, so we are back to demographic issues.
Oh, it's here.
So, as we all know, COP27 is a very important conference, and on the photo that you've shown us were only men. Why? Aren't women a part of the society too?
Excellent question, and I'm happy somebody reacted. Because I was almost going to say, is there something missing in the picture? No, actually there are 3 women, but you do not really see them because they are in dark suits and they are physically tiny and one of them, I believe, has a scarf, so you do not realize it. So you have 3 women out of 30. So yes, indeed, there is still a huge unbalance. It's representative of the, how do you say, the state of government and governance in the world. There are 3, perhaps in 5 years from now, there will be 10 or 12, we don't know. Things are changing, but excellent remark.